Pay attention, kiddos. This is the part where you explain to me exactly what it is I'm looking at.
It's 2013. Attack on Titan has just premiered, and it's already doing something most anime at the time weren't doing. It's making death feel permanent. Characters fans had grown attached to were getting torn apart mid-sentence, with no warning and no music cue to soften it. Into that world walks a soldier, barely over 5 feet tall, introduced as a former criminal turned into the strongest fighter humanity has. At the time, nobody could have predicted that this character, with maybe 15 minutes of screen time in his first real arc, would go on to become one of the most recognizable characters in anime history, eventually topping global popularity polls for years in a row, appearing in fashion collaborations, cafes, and merchandise lines most anime characters never sniff. So how did a side character in a story that wasn't even about him become the face of the entire series? Levi wasn't originally supposed to be this important. Hajime Isayama has said in interviews that Levi began as a relatively minor addition to the cast, someone to represent the elite tier of the Survey Corps, a foil to Erwin's strategic mind and Eren's raw impulsiveness. But something happened in the writing process that happens with a lot of breakout characters. The character started pulling focus, panel by panel, chapter by chapter, until the story had to make room for him. Anime has no shortage of strongest character archetypes. Usually they fall into one of two buckets: the stoic, untouchable mentor figure, or the loud, chest-thumping powerhouse who announces his own strength before he demonstrates it. Levi did neither. He was quiet, almost to the point of being cold. He cleaned obsessively, spoke in clipped, unimpressed sentences, and treated the deaths around him with a restraint that read, to a lot of first-time viewers, as indifference. It wasn't indifference. It was containment. And that distinction is exactly what turned Levi from the strong guy into a character people wrote essays about. If there's a single sequence that took Levi from fan favorite to generational anime character, it's the female Titan arc. Specifically, the extended solo fight where he single-handedly outmaneuvers an opponent that had just wiped out most of his squad in front of him. The animation team at Wit Studio treated this sequence less like a typical action scene and more like a dance. Every 3D maneuver gear movement was deliberate, economical, brutal, matching exactly who the character was supposed to be. Clips of this fight spread outside the anime community entirely. People with zero context for Attack on Titan were sharing it because the choreography alone communicated everything about the character without a single line of dialogue. In Japanese, Levi is voiced by Hiroshi Kamiya, an actor already respected for playing controlled, emotionally restrained characters. Kamiya has talked about deliberately underplaying Levi's line reads, keeping the volume low even in high-stakes moments, because he believed the character's strength should sound like control, not aggression. In the English dub, Matthew Mercer took on the role, and, much like Hayden Christensen stepping into a suit that came to define his career, Mercer's performance became so associated with the character that it's now difficult for a huge portion of the Western fanbase to separate the two. Here's the part that's genuinely rare. Attack on Titan is fundamentally Eren's story. Eren is the protagonist. Eren's arc is the emotional and thematic backbone of the entire series. And yet, poll after poll, merchandise line after merchandise line, Levi consistently outperforms him in popularity. That's not a knock on Eren. It's a signal about what audiences were actually craving. In a story about how power corrupts, how ideology consumes people, and how good intentions curdle into atrocity, Levi remained the one constant. He never chased power for its own sake. He never let grief turn him into a monster, even when he had every reason to. Levi's influence didn't stay contained to Attack on Titan. You can trace his DNA through half a decade of anime characters that followed. The quiet, restrained, strongest archetype, who communicates through action instead of declaration, became far more common in the years after his popularity exploded. He also did something few anime characters manage. He crossed over into general internet culture completely divorced from the source material. Reaction images, out-of-context clips, clean freak memes. Levi exists in spaces now where people have genuinely never watched a single episode of the show he's from. Levi Ackerman was never supposed to be the face of Attack on Titan. He was a supporting character in someone else's story. But sometimes, a character shows up, does almost nothing to announce themselves, and ends up defining an entire generation's idea of what strength in anime is supposed to look like.